One of the great pleasures of living in Taipei is to be able to travel its mass rapid transit system, the Taipei MRT. This valuable piece of infrastructure has been around for as long as I've been here, but it was only after a recent trip to San Francisco and Los Angeles that I appreciated just how big of a deal its convenience and ease of use actually is for daily life. So I looked into it and did some reading, much to the boredom of my friends and family. This is my big case study write-up of the political, financial, and economic forces behind the infrastructure development of today's Taipei MRT. The Taipei MRT is Taiwan's largest rapid transit line system, with 81.5 total miles of track. As of 2019, it consists of 5 lines connecting a total of 117 stations. The idea first began in 1968 when Minister of Transportation and Communications Sun Yun-sen looked into a mass transit system to deal with Taipei's burgeoning traffic congestion problems. The project at the time, though, was shelved because, like with all complicated infrastructure systems, the undertaking would have been really hard. There would have been conflicts of interest between all sorts of various agencies at a central, municipal, and county level. It would also have cost an insane amount of money. The government determined that it would take years to raise the money and the expertise for a fully fledged rapid transit system. The government finally approved the transit project in 1986 with a budget of 441.7 billion new Taiwan dollars, which is about 14 billion USD, and opened an entire transit department for doing so. The reason the government finally approved and went forward with the project was because of the sheer number of cars on the Taipei streets. From 1971, there were 150,000 cars, and that eventually grew to nearly a million in 1986, 15 years later. The smog and the gridlock led to an outcry for a developed transit solution. At the same time, the Taiwan government was enjoying the benefits of a booming export-driven economy and decided it could afford the cost of its infrastructure. It is noted that around this time, the Taiwan government was in the midst of an investment spree, revamping its healthcare system to provide universal healthcare coverage, as well as other social benefits and amenities. After growing wealthy from its export economy, it wanted ways to improve the well-being of its citizens. Let's move on to the geographic challenges of developing the Taipei MRT. The first construction stage of the Taipei MRT consisted of 6 lines with 88 kilometers of track and 77 stations. Half of them would have to be underground, with the rest sitting on Taipei's soft lakebed ground. Many of these stations are rather complex, with multiple levels above and below ground. Da'an, for example, has 5 levels, though not all of them are underground. The project would require the crews to dig as deep as 120 feet into Taipei's geology, and in this case it was for a ventilation shaft for Banqiao Station. Taipei sits within a large geographic basin called the Taipei Basin, which is a triangle-shaped region in between a number of mountain ranges, including the massive Yangmingshan Mountain to the north. Being a former lakebed, Taipei's natural ground is actually rather soft, which leads to unique challenges for those stations sitting above ground. The land under Taipei city area has 6 layers, with the east mostly characterized as silty clay, and the west has silty sand with seams of clay. Under that silt is a layer of gravel which acts as Taipei's water reservoir. It also caused lots of water flooding for the machines digging the MRT tunnels. Several times, steel fragments would choke the screw and slow progress. When this happened, the screw would need to be cleared by hand, forcing the team to pump water out of the tunnel so that a person can go in there and remove the fragments. So I don't envy that job. Thousands of years ago, Taipei City's ground used to be a lakebed, which is surrounded by a huge forest. Fallen trees would thus be encased and entombed in the layers of sand, silt, and water, and they were unable to decompose due to the lack of oxygen. Thus, the drilling team found massive tree trunks, 5 or 6 feet across and 15 to 20 feet tall, as far as 60 feet underneath the surface. For the most part, the tunnel machine drilled right through them. But in one notable incident, during the construction of what is now the Orange Line, the drill hit a titanic tree trunk that the drill could not push through, but instead pushed forward for over 300 feet. The trunk created a vacuum into which soil, sand, and water all rushed in, clogging the tunnels and forcing a delay. Overall, though, the hardest challenges the team had to deal with was to properly manage the groundwater levels and the structural integrity of the tunnel walls. The team learned from its early mistakes and gained increasing familiarity with the geography of Taipei's landscape. Their underground and foreground work quickened and gained efficiency. The complexity of the Taipei MRT construction project, which was the first of its kind in the area, meant that Taiwan needed outside expertise. Some of the things that construction crews would need to do, which include a massive underground tunnel, were fantastically complex. The local Taiwanese construction companies did not have the knowledge and experience to build something like this. The Taiwan government saw this as an opportunity for local companies to learn from the experience brought in by foreigners. Over time, the local contractors would then take over for future construction efforts. So the government held a number of fairs and conferences in various countries to try and attract interest in the project. 253 locals and 106 international contractors would participate in the Taipei MRT's first stage construction. Most of the international contractors were Japanese, as the Japanese had long-term working relationships with Taiwan, with offices established there since the 1950s. As Japan was running a trade deficit with Taiwan at the time, this project would also help with that. Few European and American companies got involved. The local contractors were mostly government-owned, as few private Taiwanese construction companies had the wherewithal and the professionalism to handle a project on par with the Taipei MRT. But as planned, over time, the builders received enough experience to eventually take over from the Japanese contractors. Today, the builders and operators of the Taipei Metro are consulted for metro projects in other areas in other countries around the world. The fruits of effort. It would take 10 years for the first lines to be open to the public after the bill passed, meaning the money and budget was released. A single line, the Brown Line, from Dongshan High School to the Taipei Zoo in March 1996 was opened. A second line, the Red Line, from Dongshan to the port area of Damsui, which revitalized the area as a tourist destination after decades of stagnation, began service in March 28, 1997. 3 years later, a third line, the Blue Line, opened in the heart of Taipei's downtown, and then the first Brown Line received an extension to Taipei's northern neighborhoods in 2000. 2 more lines, which are the Green Line and the Orange Line, were added in the subsequent 14 years. And then the latest opening is the Taoyuan Airport MRT line connecting Taipei with the international airport, the Taoyuan Airport. And that metro system has begun to expand out of Taipei itself into the neighboring city of Taoyuan. The time it took from the time when the government gave the okay to completion was about 10 years. The budget of the Taipei MRT project quoted in US dollars ballooned from $4 billion to $17 billion, not necessarily because of delays and cost overruns, but because the Taiwanese currency got stronger as the export-driven economy developed over the years. A key point about the Taipei MRT system's expansions over the years has to do with the fact that, unlike with how it is with the United States, the MRT company running the trains does not actually pay the cost of building the train's infrastructure. The money for that came from the central and city governments, and while that might sound like a handout, doing it that way allowed the corporation to focus on operating the system efficiently and on budget. Previous experiences in Japan and Malaysia found that burdening the train operating companies with the complete debt of infrastructure as well as pensions for the workers tends to cripple even the best-running companies operating even in the most densest of areas, meaning that even if the area is very conducive for a large transit network, making them pay for it just is too much. Government needs to be there in some form or way. That is how the New York City was able to build its massive metro system during the first half of the 20th century. Thus, in paying for the Taipei Metro, the Taiwan government was distributing a favor to its flagship city and capital, one that millions in the area enjoy every day. This has always been a point of contention for other cities, especially in Taiwan's more agricultural and industrial south. But new line expansions into New Taipei City, as well as Taoyuan, as well as light rail networks in Taichung and Kaohsiung, bode well for the future of mass transit in Taiwan. And in this image right here is the yellow line in Taipei MRT, which I'm personally very excited about. I can't wait to ride that when it opens in June 2019. All right, thank you again for listening to this video. I hope to have more coming out in the future. I'm sorry about geeking about Taipei MRT infrastructure for 15 minutes, but I loved it. It was great. Thanks.